Good morning and happy Valentine's Day, everyone. Welcome to the Maine Chamber of Commerce and Thomas College Business Breakfast Series. My name is Kim Lindloff. I'm the President and CEO of the Maine Chamber, and it's my pleasure to welcome you here this morning. I'm also a graduate of Thomas College, and we were just talking about how this campus has grown and how beautiful it is. It's a pleasure to be here. About a dozen of you in this room were here last night because we had a business after hours, so I particularly want to thank you for making the 12-hour turnaround to be here again this morning. We really appreciate it. I want to thank our 2019 Business Breakfast Series sponsors. They include AT&T, Cross Insurance, People's United Bank, Nicholson, Michaud and Company, CPAs, O'Donnell, Lee, McCowan and Phillips, attorneys at law. The Morning Sentinel is our print media sponsor, and Mix 107.9 is our radio sponsor. We hope you had a chance to visit our business spotlight table out back. Today we featured Maine Technology Group, and at the end we'll be pulling a business card. They're giving away a $50 Chamber gift certificate to one lucky winner. I also want to thank Crossroads-TV. They're here taping this program today. It will be rebroadcast on Spectrum Channel, Local Access Channel 1301. If you want to see it again, it'll also be put up on YouTube, on its YouTube channel. So if you have a colleague that you really want to see this presentation, there's no excuse. You can watch it anytime, day or night. We have evaluation forms on your table, and our Business Breakfast Series Committee uses these forms to plan our breakfasts for the next year. We also provide the feedback to our speaker, exactly how you write it. So that includes typos. It's brutally honest. So if you want to provide feedback to our speaker or our committee, please take the time to complete that. You can either leave it on the table or drop it off at the registration when you enter. We have sold 115 tables in our business-to-business showcase, which is upcoming the end of March. If you haven't reserved your table, you ought to do that. It's very, very affordable, and we're booking up fast. Kelly has registration forms over there. We also have our business after hours and business breakfast series schedules at the registration table for the remainder of 2019. Our next event that we're hosting is February 27th at Mmcb's. We're doing our leadership luncheon. And we have a really neat guest this time. Well, they're all actually pretty cool, but she's on the Maine Biz Next Women People to Watch list. Her name is Deirdre Fry. She is a veterinarian, but she started out as a computer programmer and then became a vet. She founded a company called Vet at Your Door in 2015. It provides veterinary house calls throughout Maine. And now I get to introduce our speaker, Neil Kiely. He's the president of Androscoggin Bank, which is a nearly 150-year-old community bank with headquarters in Lewiston. Before joining the bank, Neil served as director on the Androscoggin Bank board. His background includes law, real estate development, and other entrepreneurial ventures. Most recently, he served 5 years as the Director of Development for New England for First Wind LLC in Portland, where he led internal and external teams in all aspects of the development of grid-scale wind and solar projects, from site identification through permitting and community relations to construction. He received his JD from Emory University School of Law and his undergrad from Boston College. He serves on the University of Southern Maine Advisory Board and the Maine Advisory Board for the Trust for Public Land. He lives in Falmouth with his wife Elise, who's joining us today, and their 2 children. Please join me in welcoming Neil Kiely.
I guarantee my wife will be my toughest critic. Great. Thank you all for having me today. I really appreciate the invitation. I got to confess, I thought about messing with you a little this morning. I was going to put up 6 slides of hardcore economic graphs, and my 7th slide was going to say, gotcha. Because I figured that's what you were expecting when you had a banker speaking this morning. I was thinking about this the way up here. I never actually spoke to anyone directly at the Chamber. I got an indirect invitation to speak on the topic of sustainability. Now, as you heard, I'm not a traditional banker. And a big chunk of my career was actually developing large-scale wind and solar farms. And it didn't occur to me until I was driving up today. I said, what if they really invited me here to talk about environmental sustainability? So if that's the case, I apologize. Instead, I want to talk about something that's really dear to me, something that I'm passionate about, and I hope by the time I'm done speaking, you'll understand precisely why. So let's just jump right into, oh, we gotta do this first. Oh, back up. Thank you. If we can see that okay. So here's my topic. Let's just jump into a definition. So what is a competitive advantage? It's essentially a differentiated value proposition that causes you to choose my product or service over my competitor. So for Walmart example, it may be the lowest cost provider, right? Now, for those of you who run businesses, it is hard enough for all of us to identify a competitive advantage. It's even more challenging to maintain it over time, and that's what I'm getting at by sustainable. So for example, I saw an article recently that said that of all the companies listed on the stock exchange today, less than 10% are able to sustain market-beating financial returns for more than 3 years. Now, why is that? Well, two primary reasons, right? We come up with some kind of innovation, it enables us to offer a lower price or new feature or benefit, and our competitors see it, and they copy us. They reverse engineer it, they introduce it to the market, and they pull us back to parity. Or the inverse. They leap ahead with an innovation, and if we're lucky, we reel them back in. If we're unlucky, and it's a quantum leap or a really qualitative change, we become Blockbuster to their Netflix, and we go out of business. So this is a fascinating topic to me. So I thought today I would share the bank's journey, which we started a few years ago, to formally redefine what we hope will be our sustainable competitive advantage for the next 10 to 15 years to ensure we stay relevant to our clients and financially viable. Now, what we're really talking about today is success. And before I go into the bank story, I want to share a little story about my personal definition of success and how it shifted in a profound way, because it had a direct impact on somewhat the unconventional path we decided to take as a bank. So my personal definition of success was shaped by being raised as one of 7 kids in a large Irish Catholic family. Now, my dad had a good middle-class job, but when you divide anything by 9 people, there's not a lot left over. One of my earliest memories was standing in the kitchen and watching my mother divide up a package of Oreo cookies. And by the time she was done, I think we each got 3. I also remember being about 12 or 13 years old, and all I wanted in the world more than anything else was my first pair of Nike sneakers. But they weren't in the budget. So I remember thinking to myself right then at that early age, you know what, when I grow up, I want to be able to make enough money that I can buy whatever I want whenever I want it. And that was my first part of my definition of success. The second thing is, when you're one of 7, life is about competition and achievement. My siblings were incredibly competitive and high achievers, so achievement became the second part of my definition. And finally, when you are raised one of 7, you are essentially raised by wolves. And when you run in a pack, anything you can do without asking for help or on your own is really sweet. So that became the third definition, or third part of my definition. So I pursued that definition with a vengeance. And I rang the bell a number of times in my life by that definition. But if I was honest, it always felt, I had something in the back of my mind that something was missing. It felt a little bit shallow, but I couldn't put my finger on it. I probably would have gone on that way if the universe hadn't intervened to teach me a really profound lesson about success. So that lesson started on March 13, 2013. I was coming home from work that night, and I followed some fire trucks into my neighborhood. And then I followed them into my driveway. And then I got out of my car, my wife collapsed in my arms, and we watched our home burn. And I watched a lot of the so-called symbols of my success go up in smoke with it. Now, you would think that that would be enough of an event for the universe to get my attention, but she wasn't done with us yet. I will spare you the details, but week after week, month after month, we had challenges from every quarter of our life come at us. And I would say that, you know, a year later, I was standing in the kitchen of my house with my wife. We were under construction, and she held my hand. She said, you know, Neil, I think we're finally going to be okay. That night, we got a call that my in-laws' house had burned down in Maryland. I kid you not. And the next day, found me walking through another burned-out house trying to salvage personal mementos. 2 memories indelibly seared in my brain from that experience. 1, waking up at our neighbor's house with absolutely nothing except the clothes they were wearing the night before. And 2, the first time someone pressed a gift card into my hand. I had never been on the receiving end of charity. But those memories were completely washed away by what came next. For every curve the universe threw us, friends, family, neighbors, perfect strangers stepped up and just absolutely held our family. The thing that my wife and I were most terrified that night of the fire was that our 2 children would be psychologically scarred by this experience. It was actually the opposite. Like us, they came out with this deep, renewed faith in human nature, because when their world was literally crumbling around them, this invisible safety net came out and held them. So this is what, and I'll bake up, you know, this is what the fire taught me, but more importantly, the people who came to support us taught me about why my definition of success was wrong. It is not about material things. It's about the number and quality of relationships in your life. It's not about achievement. It's about being of service and taking care of others. And it's not about going it alone, right? It's about being part of a community. And I can stand here today and say that year of living dangerously was worth the shift to a broader, deeper, more fulfilling definition of success. Here's the irony, though. For the first time in my life, it led to a new tension because my personal concept of success no longer aligned with my professional concept of success. And it no longer aligned with the concept of success I saw being practiced at most of the companies with which I was familiar. And at the time, it was particularly acute for me because I was working for a company that's owned by private equity. And if you don't know anything about private equity, suffice it to say they're even more hyper-focused on profits as a narrow definition of success than any other company. But I had this intuition that you could build a company that embraces broader definition of success, relationships, service, and community. And not only could you compete and be profitable, I thought that you could thrive and win. I just never knew if I'd have the opportunity to put it into practice. And then in December of 2014, I got a call from the CEO of our bank. I was sitting on the board, and he said, "Neil, I've got this radical idea." He said, "What would you think about stepping off the board and coming in to join executive management and help me lead a transformation of the bank?" I knew right away this was the unique opportunity that I was looking for. He was talking about a transformation because the board knew that our industry was about to change more in the next 10 years than it had in the last 50 years. I also knew we were a mutual bank, which means we're owned by our depositors. We don't have shareholders. So I didn't have the added hurdle of trying to explain to shareholders why we should broaden our definition of success. And finally, it would be a leadership role, so I knew I'd have the opportunity to actually influence the direction of the bank. But don't get me wrong, I had no delusions this would be easy. We were talking about introducing a broader definition of success to a company and an industry that's literally all about money, right? And there were other challenges. You may think that banking is boring. I can tell you it is not. We have a lot going on right now. We have an aging demographic in Maine, which means our clients are getting older, they're using less and less banking services. So we need to replace them eventually, correct? Well, there's very little organic growth, so we have to take them from competitors. Well, we have over 30 banks and 67 credit unions here in Maine. There's a lot of competition for the same people. And candidly, most people don't see they assume there's no difference from one financial institution to the other. So trying to differentiate yourself is really hard. And competition is not our only problem. Our clients are not benchmarking their experiences against the bank down the street. Their experiences are being created by Apple and Google and Amazon. And then there are millennials. Any millennials in the room? Maybe one. The next generation of clients, right? I saw a survey recently that said 50% of millennials would switch to Amazon tomorrow if Amazon offered banking services. 70% said they'd rather go to the dentist than sit down with a banker. Think about that, right? And these companies are introducing, a pace of change with technology to our industry for an industry that's not known for its agility. And finally, we have a looming talent shortage. And I know everybody in this room probably says we have a talent shortage, but think about it. We have the millennials' view towards banking, and how many of you have had your young children come to the breakfast table and say, "Mom, Dad, I want to grow up to be a banker," right? It's just not happening. So when I stepped into the bank as chief strategy officer, we sat down with the management team, the CEO, and said, okay, we need to identify a sustainable competitive advantage that will differentiate us in the marketplace, that cannot be easily duplicated, that will position us for the kind of shifting dynamics of the industry, and will also position us for this looming talent shortage. How's that for your first day assignment? So we sat down, rolled up our sleeves, and we said, okay, the first question is, what's guaranteed not to change in the next 10 to 15 years in our industry? The only thing we could come up with is that our clients will always be human beings, right? And we said, what do human beings want? Well, based on my experience, they want quality relationships with great people. Now, I couldn't simply waltz into the board and say, listen, I've got this intuition. Will you let me run with it? They have a fiduciary duty to the institution. They have to be great financial stewards. I needed something more than that. Ironically, it was a CPA friend of mine that introduced me to economic theory that allowed me to demonstrate to the board that, hey, if instead of focusing exclusively on profits, we focus on treating people or focus on people in the right way, we could actually end up creating more profit. He did it by introducing me to a book called The Service Profit Chain by some professors out of Harvard. And this is what they kind of lay out in their book. They did a lot of research, and they said typically a company approaches its business this way. They look out and they set financial targets for profitability and growth, and then they reverse engineer all the way back. What are the markets we want to play in? Who are the people we want to sell to? What are the products we want to sell? How do we want to price them? What are the distribution channels we want to leverage? And finally, how do we want to compensate our employees? And all along the way, their guiding principle is profit maximization. It's kind of the Walmart model, right? But they said they noticed something different. For some companies that have a service element to what they do, they said the biggest correlation between profitability and growth is the depth of relationship with your existing client and their willingness to refer you to other people. And they said the biggest driver of that depth and willingness is the value proposition, and the biggest driver of the value proposition is employee engagement. So if you reverse it, they said if you drive employee engagement through the roof, they're going to drive the value proposition, deepen relationships with your existing clients, drive referrals, and it'll lead to market-leading growth. So, okay, that actually makes sense to us. What's really interesting about this book, though, is they do a great job of breaking out the value proposition. So if I can do this right. So this is the basic value proposition. In exchange for what I pay you, what are the benefits I receive? The difference here in my mind is perceived value. And I say perceived because you don't always get something tangible in return when you pay $1, right? It can be an experience. And the whole idea is to stretch that blue area. But they break it down further. They break your benefits into two quadrants. What are the solutions you offer and the quality of that experience? And they break the cost down to the price and ease of access. So ease of access is how many stores do you have? What are your hours? Do you have self-service? How easy is it to do business with you? Companies can play on either one of these levels to stretch that perceived value. So Walmart, for example, plays in the bottom. They want to be the low-cost provider, and they want to have a store within 10 miles of everyone in the United States. Geico's classic. We're going to give you the same policies as everybody else, but we're going to do it for 15% less in 15 minutes or less. Mercedes plays in the top line. We are not going to be the cheapest, but we're going to give you German engineering as a solution and a luxury experience. This model resonated with me. They said, again, now if you're in a service, if you have a service element to it, their point is that quality of experience is the best opportunity to increase perceived value. Now, I go to my favorite diner. We probably all have a favorite diner, right? And if I look at it through this lens, the solution's about the same, the quality of the food's the same, the price is about the same, ease of access is a little bit harder because I usually have to wait to get in. It's the quality of the experience that differentiates it. And what I say by that, it's not how quickly they put the eggs on my table. It's when I walk in, the waiters and waitresses know my name, they know my kids' names, they know the sports they play. And when my daughter came home from school recently, the waitress put down all her plates, waded through all these people, and gave her a giant hug. I'm paying for breakfast. I'm getting a relationship and all the emotional benefits of that, right? So it resonates. This makes sense to us. Their point is that comes from engaged employees who take the time to build those relationships. Their other point, though, is that same engaged employee can impact these other quadrants. So on the solutions, they have a direct feedback loop with what your clients want. So I'll simplify it. We're getting a lot of questions or inquiries about strawberry pancakes. What if we add those to the menu? Cost. We just found out that our vendor is going to increase the cost of our muffins. What if the employee says, what if I learn to bake, we bake them on site, we can keep the cost the same or maybe even lower it? Or my favorite, employee sitting there on the way home says, you know what, I love the Kielys. I hate the idea that they have to wait wait outside in January. What if we gave them everyone a free cup of coffee to make that wait seem a little bit shorter and let them know we care? So the interesting point about this is that what they're talking about here is not the ordinary level of engagement you get for a paycheck or the engagement you get from those rare employees that are just wired this way. They're talking about a discretionary level of engagement that employees have to choose to give you. And the idea is if you can do this in a diner, it's one thing. To do it in a small family-owned business, and a lot of businesses do it successfully, is one thing. To try and do it at scale with 173 people in a financial institution is really challenging. But being an entrepreneur, I looked at it the other way. I said, hey, if we can pull this off, it's going to be even more challenging for our competitors to do it. And for the next level up of banks at 600 people, it's going to be even more challenging. And for those at 1,000 employees, even more difficult. The other part of this, according to the book and kind of the research, and it makes sense, if you create an environment where you have that level of engagement, you're going to be a magnet for employees. So we went to the board and we said, instead of running the traditional banking model, the Walmart model, we want to run this model. But we said, before you think about this, one important caveat. you can't look at this cynically and say this is another way to exploit employees to get more out of them, right? You have to be authentic. Employees have to be an end in themselves, just like clients are an end in themselves. Fortunately, our board is great people. They're business owners, like community members like yourself, and they said, no, we get it. You know, we want to run with this. Now, back then, this was probably 4 or 5 years ago, this kind of approach was a little bit more unconventional. But what I'm seeing more and more are articles like this. More and more studies are making a direct tie between employee engagement, performance, and financial returns. So, candidly, we walked out of the boardroom that day. It felt like a victory. But reality was kind of like scoring a great parking space right close to the beginning of the marathon. The real work was just about to begin. Right? And the real work is, okay, how are we going to drive engagement through the roof at scale? So the question is, what do employees want? What the research says is they want meaningful, challenging, and purposeful work. And beneath that, I'll get that right here. These are the drivers. Integrity, purpose, challenge, growth, belonging, autonomy, significance. Now you have the recipe. How do we go about doing this? Well, this was a friend of mine said, simple but not easy. And the answer is so simple, it's one word. So what is culture? Well, at its simplest, it is a shared set of behaviors and the reason why we do it within a community, right? We all understand what that is. At its highest manifestation, its most powerful, it's a shared sense of identity. And why do I say most powerful? Because identity is one of the most powerful human dynamics there is. Look at everything that's going on with social media. That is all fueled by identity, right? So here's the next challenge, though. Culture just evolves, right? How are you going to go about shifting the culture of a 148-year-old institution? Where do you begin? Fortunately, there's a framework. Mission, vision, and values. And this is the framework we leverage to kind of shift the culture. So what's your mission? Your mission is your purpose. Why do you exist? If you want to attract and engage and motivate employees, your purpose has to be something beyond making a profit. If you want me to sacrifice some of my individual identity to participate in your shared identity, it has to be something worth sacrificing too, right? This is particularly important for millennials. If you say to a millennial, go get me a rock, they'll come back once. If you say, go get me another rock, they may come back. If you say, get me a third rock, they're not coming back. If you say to a millennial, how would you like to build a cathedral with me and help me collect the right stones? Now they're all in. And I can tell you that because in our bank, we have some incredible millennials powering our success. Now, when I got to the bank, we had a mission statement. I know because it was right outside the boardroom in giant letters on the wall. But when I asked around the bank, nobody knew it was there. No one knew what it said, so it certainly wasn't engaging folks, right? So consulting with our employees, we went back to our foundation. We said we were founded as a mutual bank. We were not founded to make profits. We were founded to take care of our clients and sustain our communities. So building on that foundation with our employees, this is what we came up with for our mission. Why is this meaningful to me and to our employees? Well, it embraces that broader definition of success we talked about, right? First thing you'll know, there's 3 stakeholders instead of 1 being a shareholder. And because of that, they're equal stakeholders because we recognize none of us individually can be successful unless all 3 of us are successful. It was also tremendously powerful for our employees to see that they were set forth as an equal stakeholder in our purpose. This is the beautiful part. When we rolled this out, we originally had employees first, following the formula of the service profit chain. Our employees came back and said, no, 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 clients have to go first. The second thing to notice is that this has nothing to do with profits, right? It doesn't have anything to do with banking. Banking is not the end in itself. What we're talking about here is trying to be a service and trying to touch people through quality relationships. So what does this look like in practice? I had a wonderful example about a month ago. We had an older gentleman in his 80s that used to come into one of our branches every day to get out $20. I know this happens a lot, right? Very few friends left, very little family left. This was his community. He would come in and banter with our frontline staff. One day he called up and said, I won't be coming in anymore. I'm going into hospice. At that point, our frontline staff took it upon themselves to take turns going to visit him in hospice. They brought baked goods. They brought board games because that was his passion. And then they just stayed with him until the end. Talk about enriching someone's life at a moment of truth. You can't pay people to do that. That has to be a choice. Now, is everything we do that dramatic? Obviously not, but it was just as enriching for that gentleman to have those relationships every day when he came in. That's what it's about. So the next leg of the stool, obviously, is your vision. So if mission is why you come to work every day, what your purpose is, your vision is where you're going, what success looks like. It's your destination. Again, if you want to motivate, engage, challenge, and excite your employees, it has to be bold, audacious, to the point of almost being scary. So here's my favorite example of a great vision statement. Right? I mean, it's just absolutely beautiful. Here's the thing about a vision statement. The great they said, this to be powerful is really an internal commitment. It's not to be shared as a marketing effort. So I'm not going to share our vision statement with you except to tell you it is wildly audacious for any company, never mind a bank. But here's an example of some other companies. I love the Alzheimer's Association, right? Bold, challenging, really motivating. The next piece of this triangle, this framework, are values. It's not enough to be successful. It's how we're successful, right? It matters just as much. So, for example, Wells Fargo won the banking game for a number of years. The way they did it doesn't feel like success to us. So this is kind of a funny story. When we got to the values component here, I had one of our trainers was helping us through this process, and she said, it's time to do values. I said, I've got this. I sat down. I'm a recovering lawyer, right? I sat down. I wrote them up. They were beautiful, elegant, inspirational, poetic, and I showed them to her. She said, this is great, Neil, but this is not how we're going to do it. I said, okay. So what we did instead, we identified 12 people from across the company, all different levels, all different departments, who we believe already exhibited the best of who we were. They were respected by their peers. And we asked them, would you help us define our values? Again, the best of who we are now and aspirationally who we want to be. Ironically, one of the people on my management team at the time said, Neil, you've got salespeople, you've got high performers, really busy people. They're not going to want to do this extra work. This is the whole point of my presentation. If you give busy people, high performers, an opportunity to do meaningful work, they will lean in and do it. And that's exactly what happened. They said, we'd be thrilled to do this. They locked themselves in a room. They came up with 45 value statements. Then they did focus groups with everybody in the company, and they said, what resonates with you? And then they did iteration after iteration until they came back to us, and they gave us a recommendation for our values. They did it with the expectation that we were going to take it and we were going to edit it and change it. But when I sat with my leadership team, I said, the whole point here is not to end up with words on a page, right? It's to end up with behaviors that people are going to actually live on a day-to-day basis. So my recommendation is we don't touch a word, and that's what we did. And that was a powerful down payment to our employees in terms of authenticity and empowerment, that we adopted the values that they came up with on a wholesale basis. One of the interesting things to notice about these values, they correlate directly to the engagement drivers, right? So we asked our employees what matters, what do they value, and they told us exactly what the research told us they would value. The other really powerful thing about this framework, with mission, vision, and values, is that you'll remember that one of the key engagement drivers is autonomy. People want to have an impact, and they want to be able to make decisions, and we need them to make decisions. But here's the risk. If I have 175 employees who are all fired up, they all want to take care of the client, they want to help the company, and they want to make decisions, there's a huge risk of chaos, right? The beauty of this framework is by telling them why we exist, where we're going, and how we want to act, they have a framework to make those decisions on the spot when we're not there. Tremendously empowering to your employees, but also has a potential tremendous impact on your clients because they can seize the moment. So let me share an example of this. A number of years ago, I was in D.C. I got a call from my brother saying my father, who was very ill, was getting close to pass. He said, you need to get home. I jumped in a car. I got to the airport. I booked a ticket on Southwest. I got through security. I ran to the gate. The door was closed. I said to the attendant, I need to get on the plane. She said, the plane has left. It's taxiing to the runway. She could tell I was distraught. She said, what's going on? I explained the situation. I went and sat down. A few seconds later, she comes back. She says, it's going to be okay. The captain is turning the plane around to come get you. Southwest competitive advantage is they are a no-frills airlines that will get you there on time. This captain was empowered to risk the ire of the clients on that plane and their schedule to turn the plane around to come get me. What I know of their culture, that wasn't an accident. He wasn't worried about getting in trouble. He was probably going to get encouraged or applauded or recognized for that. Because, again, think of the impact on the client. We call these moments of truth we have in our lives, right? When you're completely vulnerable. And they reached out and they touched it. They brought me home. I got to see my father. He passed away the next day. I will always fly Southwest. I'm sitting here sharing this story with you as a brand ambassador for them, right? It's unbelievable how powerful this framework can be. Now, some of you may be saying, okay, well, Neil, you just gave up the secret sauce. You told us how to do this. Why are you so confident to do that? Well, again, simple but not easy. And it starts with, it's not easy for leadership to implement this. When I sat down with the board, I said, before we go there, we have to realize a couple things. If I'm going to empower somebody or you're going to empower me, power is a finite commodity. And if I'm giving you power, I'm giving it up. A lot of leaders don't want to do that. I said, secondly, if we embrace a values-based culture, I can guarantee you it's going to constrain you as a board and it's going to constrain us as leaders. There's going to be a point in time when we want to make a decision that is expedient that we're not going to be able to make that decision. Finally, if you're going to be a leader in a values-based organization, you are on stage 24/7. Because if you don't live the values, all the power disappears in those values overnight. And it's no picnic for the employee in this either. You would think that it's great to work in a values-based organization. It is, but here's the difference. The bar gets raised substantially. No longer is enough to be great at what you do. Right? You have to be a great team player. You have to make others better, as a friend of mine says, and you have to bring your best self to work. That's hard. On top of that, don't make the mistake of thinking that because we weren't focused on profit, that we're making the workload easier. It was actually the opposite. Because of our mission, because of our vision, which I'll tell you has a big dose of excellence in it, we had to flip the page over, look at everything we did in the bank and said, is this good enough? And the answer was uniformly no. So we've done hundreds of projects. We've rebuilt all the technology. We've introduced new subsidiaries, new projects, website, on and on and on. So we didn't quite double the workload for our employees, but we increased it substantially. And here's the other truth about this journey. Everybody had an invitation, but we made it clear there could be no passengers on this journey. Everybody had to lean in and participate. And we had some folks that opted out. They said, you know what, this change is too hard, or I just don't like the direction. We wished them well, we understood it. The next thing I want to talk about, if you want to go from the place of a platitude of our people are our greatest asset to a true operating model based on engagement, right? You have to treat it like any other operating model. You have to build the infrastructure, the process, the procedures to make it a reality. I actually backed up on here. Well, I apologize on one of these slides. So this is one of our values development. You can see the development piece here. We also asked them to break out the actual behaviors underneath it so that we could hold each other accountable. It's really important that you and I can both have a definition of our mind of development or integrity, but if we don't define it further, we're going to walk around with different definitions, and this shared understanding is really important. So this is a snapshot of what I call our engagement ecosystem. The first thing we do is we tie mission, vision, values to everything we do. We start our leadership team meetings every week by sharing stories about where we see mission, vision, values happening in the company, both so we have this shared understanding, and two, we can put a spotlight on it. This past year, we set a mark, we had a performance goal, and we said, if we hit that performance goal, we will pick one team from the bank that best exemplifies living the value as a team this year, and they will have the privilege of awarding $10,000 to a community partner. Mission, vision, values, performance all rolled into one. Surveys, we do a survey every year, we sit down with the results, we pore over it, we come up with a plan of how we're going to take action on whatever the hot spots are. And then we have engagement specialists. We train people specially, so we'll take someone from finance and they're trained, and they'll meet with the commercial team, they'll go over their results, and they'll put together a plan for themselves. Because part of empowerment is giving them responsibility for their engagement. This is not just about management. Development plans. Development's so important. We rolled out development plans. Individuals can meet with their manager and HR specialist and come up with a development plan for themselves. What are the experience and learnings that they want to have over the next 2 to 3 years? It's not a guarantee of a promotion, but they can take control and make progress on their development. Career laddering. This was especially important with millennials. We took a lot of our positions and we broke them into level 1, 2, and 3, and we tied them to specific criteria for proficiency, and then we provided training. So people can look out and they can go from tier to tier to tier, and they can get a compensation adjustment and a title adjustment as they go, so people have that feeling that they're making progress in their careers. AB University, just the concept, we've collected all these resources from self-service to classes to videos. We just had our first graduating class, 30 graduates from our business communication certificate. 6 or 8, I think it was 6 courses on all aspects of communications they had to go through. 30 people out of 175 signed up for this course, which tells you how important it was to them. ACE projects, we pick high performers every year. We pair them with a member of the leadership team to mentor them. They do a project, they present it to the board. Performance management, this is really important to me. So many companies, your experience of the company is dependent on where you come in, what manager you get. We wanted to standardize the way we do things. We call it the AB way, performance management included. So as part of that, first of all, the performance system, evaluations are tied to your goals as well as how you live the values. For every time we have a new manager, either a promotion internally or an experienced manager coming into the company for the first time, we put them through a boot camp. 3 or 4 days, they go through our performance management system, how we do evaluations, recognition, everything else, and mission, vision, values. So we have that shared experience. Employee comp and benefits, again, just really important. We are continually looking at the benefits and compensation we pay. Recently, we decided, well, it came to our attention through the experience of one of our employees that our maternity, paternity policies did not match the level of our values. So we changed that in 3 days. And recognition the AB way, another really important engagement driver. So we recognize people for living the values. We also have a peer-to-peer recognition system, so people can go in and say thank you to each other. It's the highlight of my week. I print it off, I look at it, and I see these kind of unsung heroes. And then when they do their performance evaluation at the end of the year, they can attach the thank yous from their peers. So their manager sees all the things that they may not see on a day-to-day basis. Finally, and most importantly, communication, communication, communication. Culture is built on trust. Trust is built on transparency. Transparency is built on effective communication. So you may be asking, okay, Neil, what's the punchline here? What are the results? We are very, very early in our journey. We're just getting started, but I'm pretty confident we're on the right path. Here's why. We have seen our engagement scores go up and up and up. We've seen our client satisfaction scores go up and up and up. We have testimonials rolling in from clients at a pace and a volume we've never seen before. Think about that when someone like you, what does it take for you to pick up the pen or send an email? It has to be something exceptional. And it's typically not tied to banking. It's some other emotional benefit. In the most competitive job market we've seen in the last 10 years, our turnover rates are way down and below industry average. We've had no problem recruiting top talent. In fact, most of the people that come to our bank come to us through referrals or introductions from existing employees. I meet and interview almost everyone above the teller level that comes into our bank because it's that important. It's not enough to find great people. We want to find great people or great talented people. We want to find people we want to work with. Our community hours are up. We facilitate, we link people to community opportunities, including board seats. And finally, our growth is up substantially. We are acquiring new clients at a pace we haven't seen before. Last year, we set a really aggressive performance goal. The team doubled it. And despite all the investments we're making, we had record profits this past year. But I say, to me, that one of the most meaningful measures of where we are in our journey happened a few weeks ago. I was doing a new employee orientation, which we do, and to bring our new employees in, we tell them about our mission, vision, and values and strategy. And I always ask people how they came to the bank or how they heard about us. And a young lady put up her hand, and she said that a friend of hers had called her up and said the position was open, she should apply. So she applied, and then she got the interview. So she sent an email to her friend, our employee, and said, any suggestions on preparing for the interview? And our employee emailed her back with a copy of our mission, vision, and values and said, this is what you need to know for the interview. How powerful is that? And for me, it's, again, the financial results are the end. We focus on driving value for our employees and for our clients. And we wrap it all up in operational excellence, and we know those financial things will come. What's meaningful to me is to see the lights come on for a young employee. When you stretch them, they grow and they have success. Or for a veteran, when you ask them to do something differently or take on a new role or to mentor somebody, and they're successful. It's the energy, it's the laughter that we have in our organization. And then it's the stories that are coming back to us from our clients, from the employees, and from our community partners about the difference they see in our organization. As a leader, my definition of leadership is influencing others to achieve meaningful results. And there's absolutely nothing more meaningful to me than what I've just described. So thank you for your time this morning and allowing me to share my passion. I really appreciate it. I hope you enjoyed it.
Neil, what's the title of that book you referenced at the beginning that was written by the Harvard?
The title of the book I referenced is called The Service Profit Chain. And they have a sequel called The Ownership Quotient. And the concept of that is, how do you get employees to a place where they act as owners of the company and make decisions as owners?
Say the second one again.
The Ownership Quotient.
Any other questions for Neil? Didn't mean to be just me.
I'm having way too much fun. I'm having way too much fun. I will offer, though, that this is, as you can tell, really a passion of mine. And if anybody has, if you're down this path, or you're thinking about this path, or you just want to have a cup of coffee, I would love to do it. I've been the beneficiary of a lot of folks. We are certainly not the only company out there doing this. There's a lot of great companies in Maine, a lot of family-owned companies that do a lot of this naturally. We're simply trying to do it at scale. And I've learned a lot from my fellow leaders that are further along the path. I feel incumbent upon me to share what I've learned along the way. So,
Would you say you see this easier or more difficult at a smaller level versus a bigger level?
my assumption it would be easier, right? Because, and let's say, part of this is bringing the right folks in that are somewhat oriented that way and being clear about expectations. One of the reasons I try to interview everybody that comes in the company is one, to make sure they're the right fit, but two, to be really clear about where we're going and what the standards are for how we treat clients, how we treat our peers. So I think just as a matter of scale, in a smaller environment, that's easier to do, to get to that feeling or get to that level. I think the challenge is, we're all human beings. So the larger the population of human beings, the larger the population of people coming from all different walks of life. The other challenge here, I would say, is that people don't show up with a blank slate. They're bringing a legacy of memories of other bosses, other colleagues, and other companies. And I think that was one of the biggest learnings for me, is that it wasn't a matter of me coming in and walking the walk for 6 months to demonstrate who I was and that I was authentic. You were overcoming a lot of experiences, sometimes poor leadership, other business models, and I think it's just more challenging at scale. And candidly, with the talent challenges we have here too, going out and finding those great people, right? It's a certain type of person that really is drawn to this, and there's not unlimited supplies out there, which I think over time, if you become a magnet, and what we're seeing now is, more and more people coming. And in the banking industry, small, I know if we have somebody from People's here, and it's kind of funny because one of my latest interviews, I was sitting and talking to a woman, and she looked at me, and she had a very dry sense of humor. She said, "How did you get all those people in one place?" Right? And then after 3 months at the company, I said, "How are things going?" She said, "There are no jerks here." And I said, "Well, that's actually one of our hiring criteria. We have an algorithm." I could dress it up a little fancier, but it really is a no jerk rule, right? As a fellow CEO said, we made a decision that we don't want to hire talented jerks. We think we can find talented people who are not jerks, right? So, yes, sir.
I appreciate your unvarnished look at the fact that some people did not come along with the journey, because too often we hear rainbows, unicorns, and everything is great. In this environment of low unemployment, difficult to find good talent, can you talk a little bit about how you decided those people were not going to be able to come along with the journey, what you did to try to engage them, and then what was the final criteria for saying it's not going to work, and did they self-select themselves out? How did that work?
Great question. The great question is how, when people, the circumstances under which people left, how we approached it. So this is, if you're going to build a culture based on values, our commitment is it's an invitation. And you have to recognize that people are going to take time to do that invitation. So folks that want to change, what I said, okay, I want to work in a values-based culture. Well, guess what? We all have to change, myself included. So you have to give people time to do that. And there's also a great learning, a separate talk on change management and the change cycle is a fascinating, a fascinating topic. So change is hard, so you have to be patient. We really took the thing that everyone's invited, and we were going to wait and support as much as possible. And then, candidly, we really didn't make a lot of decisions to separate people. They'd have to be that I'm definitely not going to go along, and I'm going to be an obstructionist. We had a situation, though, candidly, and it's a really important part of our journey, so I'm glad you asked it, where we had a group of officers that somewhat together decided, we don't think this is the right way, we like the old way, and maybe the old power structures, and so they decided to leave en masse. And it was, a pretty big challenge to the organization. We have to take care of clients. And the story was, about an hour after the last person handed his resignation, and one of our high performers walked into the CEO's office and said, "Do you have a minute?" And he looked up and said, "Not if you're going to hand me your resignation." And he said, "No, this is my anti-resignation. I'm in. I'm not going anywhere." And then he came into my office and said the same thing. And then I started getting emails and calls. Because at that point in our journey, everybody knew that the workload was about to get much more difficult. We had that many people leaving. We had to take care of clients. If there was ever a time you were going to dust off your resume, that was the time. It forced everybody in our company to look in the mirror and say, do I want to be a part of this? And, fortunate for us, right, because we hadn't seen all the benefits. We were in the hard work stage and the promise. And fortunately, they all, our key high performers said, we are all in. And then people, they left their silos, and companies, people from different departments went to other departments to say, how do we help? And we have not looked back since that point. So ironically, it was a really, it was really a kind of a critical stage in our journey, our new shared identity. And people were forced to make a decision, yes or no, whether they're coming with us, and they did. And that just really fueled us and gave us tremendous momentum going forward. But you have to, this is, if you're going to be a values-based culture and you're going to walk the walk, that's the hardest part, is you can't deviate from it. I heard a definition that culture is the lowest acceptable behavior the CEO will tolerate. And you also can't have people in the back of the room going like this, right? So it is scary and everything else, but you kind of have to go for broke. And I think you have to trust in the model that if you act this way, you will find the right people over time. And that's that's been our experience. Great question.
Thank you, Neil.
Thank you very much.